What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So as you can tell by the title and thumbnail of the video, we're starting a new project today, and this is something I've been wanting to do for a while now, but I've just been waiting for the right timing and to find a good deal on a frame, and I finally got a good deal on one. So we're going to be starting a new mini ATV project. But before I talk about it too much and actually talk about my plans with it, let's start off by getting the MB pulled out of the garage, and we can get the new project pulled in here and take a closer look at it, because she's pretty rough and she's gonna need some work, but you guys will be here for the ride. So let's get her pulled in here and then we can talk about it a little bit more. So as you guys can tell, this thing is pretty dang rough. It's not the nicest thing you can find on Facebook Marketplace, but hey, for the deal I got it for, I really can't complain. Just the front suspension alone is worth that, and I could use that in pretty much like a go-kart or anything else I wanted to do. But yeah, this thing is not the cleanest, and it's missing a whole rear end, brake system and all that. But it is a solid little base to at least start off with. At least I got a solid frame with front suspension. The tires don't really matter because I'll probably end up replacing those later on. And then if you guys remember, I did the drift trike maybe a month or two ago. I don't really remember, but remember, I put an ATV axle on this thing, and I've been looking for a new frame for this just because I ended up twisting that whole frame. So that's just been kind of pushed off to the back burner. So I think I'm going to end up stealing that axle and putting it under this thing. And luckily I already have brand new tires and sleeves on that. So my whole goal with this thing is to build it into a small little drift ATV with a bunch of angle in the front, just slam down. I'm still gonna do a 6.5 horsepower motor just to keep it kind of relevant with all the other projects going on. As you can tell, it already has one installed, but whoever installed this thing did not do it right. It's got like some aluminum plate right here with a bunch of U-bolts, U-bolting it to the frame, and this engine's just like kind of in there, but it's not solid at all. And I can tell this thing never worked because that clutch would run straight into the exhaust. Nothing worked here, but this motor is basically just for parts. It's been, who knows what's been done to it, but luckily it's got a nice black cover so I can snag a couple things off of that. But my goal in today's video is at least get this thing stripped down, get an idea of what we're actually looking at with frame wise, see how bad it needs any repairs, because I've just been noticing a lot more rust on the back section here, but it looks like a lot of just surface. There's a few spots that might need a little touching up, but most of it's gonna get chopped off anyways, like brackets like this can get chopped out of here. I think I'm gonna end up doing a handbrake so I can get rid of this little foot brake there, kind of clean up a few things, get all these plastics off because these things are ugly, get that seat off of there, kind of just get an idea of what we're looking at. And then I would like to at least get it into a roller in this video by tearing out the axle off the mini bike or the drift trike over here and getting it slapped up under the ATV, getting it all bolted up. And then we can actually have a nice little roller to push around instead of dragging this thing around with just the front wheels and no back end. So let's start tearing this thing down. Let's get an idea of what we're looking at, and then I can actually start building a parts list on what I'm actually gonna need to actually swap the 6.5 horsepower motor into it. I basically have most of the parts I think I need. I got a clutch, I got an engine plate, I got an engine. I might just need like a chain. I'm thinking, since I'm gonna slam this thing down, I'm gonna need some suspension and stuff, but I might end up just building some solid suspension. We'll see how that goes, but that'll be later on. And definitely paint this thing up, make it look sweet, and it'd be just a fun little cruiser that's kind of slammed down. Anyone can hop on it, cruise around, drift around, have some fun with it. And it's not too big where it's actually like filling up the whole garage. But right now, I am getting filled up with all the mini bikes and the car's in here, so we had to pull one out to at least get this thing in here. But once it's actually a roller, then we can at least like push it off to the side and then pull it out whenever we're working on anything else. So let me start tearing this thing down, stop talking because I've talked too much, and see what we're looking at, and then we can start getting an idea of what we actually need for this thing. Thank God for power tools, because that made it go a lot quicker than I expected. And once I got this thing tore down, she's definitely a little more rough than I expected, but luckily I'm not seeing any major rot holes or anything going through the frame from all this rust. So I've been tapping it around with a hammer and my pry bar, just seeing if anything feels like soft or if it blows a hole right through it. Everything feels pretty good, so I'm guessing most of this is surface. Once I actually sand it down and get ready for paint, that's when I'll notice, but I think it should be a solid frame to mount up onto. And luckily they didn't do too much modification mounting up that 6.5 horsepower motor in here. They only just chopped out a bar that looks like it went right in between here, which I was probably gonna end up doing anyways, but I kind of want that bar because I'm thinking how the engine plate's gonna go back in there. But this thing's a pretty solid little frame, so now we can actually get to work on installing some parts onto this thing. I think I'm gonna tear down the drift trike real quick, get the axle off there, and then we can start bolting it up on here. Should be super easy. It's just these 4 little bolts that hold kind of the bearing section that holds the axle in there, and then everything else will line up. Luckily I got a brand new shock and spring on that as well that I can use for the rear, so that'll be all good, and then we can actually see this thing as a complete roller. So I just got the axle off the drift trike and got that put back onto the desk there, and then I mounted up the axle onto the ATV, and this thing just looks hilarious with a skinny rear and wide front. This is what it looks like from the front. So I think definitely looks a little funky, but I think this axle might not be the 100% correct one for a 125. I was told the axle came off a 125 ATV, but no biggie. If anything, I was planning on doing new rims and tires for the front anyways. So these are 7-inch rims, which are really weird. I've never seen those before, and it's really hard to find tires for them. So I was planning on at least doing new rims that are 6-inch with some smaller tires, pretty much the same exact rim and tire as the rear. So that should skinny up the front a ton. And then I was even mounting up my shock. I don't have the right bolts for it, but this shock is not even correct. You can see the gap inside of there. So this shock is more like a front shock. I was just comparing it, and they pretty much match up perfectly. And that shock is like 3 inches shorter than the front one. So I think I'm gonna order up another one of those so I can have both of those on the front, and it should lower down the front like 3 or 4 inches, and it should look perfect, level this thing out like how I want. And then I'll order up a smaller shock for the rear. That'll help level this whole thing out completely. I think it should be like a little 4 or 5 inch shock, nothing too crazy. And then I should line up my sprocket to my kind of engine placement area and not really interfere with the swing arm too much. So that should be solid. Looking at this thing more, I did notice it even has front brakes on it. So that's kind of cool. It's got front brakes on both sides, so we can definitely hook those things up and do some nasty burnouts with this thing. So I got a couple of cool little ideas. So now I'm gonna start researching a few things, seeing what I can do with this thing, like ordering up some wheels and tires so I can get this thing a nice roller. And I maybe even try bolting the rear ones up on the front because they're both the same little 3-bolt pattern. I just gotta make sure that they're the same front and back. And if they are, then I can just order up those same rims and tires for the front and then just kind of swap it around, or maybe order up some wider ones for the rear to kind of help balance this out completely. And other than that, just start looking at a couple other parts like a chain tensioner, looking at brake cables and brake handle. I already have a hydraulic caliper on the rear, so I can just hook up a line going all the way to the front. And I was thinking about doing just like a little hand grip on the left side of the handlebar, so then you have your left hand brake that'll lock you up the rear, and then on the right side above the throttle you'll have your front brakes. and it'll be pretty solid little machine. So I'm gonna start playing around with this thing a little bit, and then I'll get back with you guys once I got kind of a plan on what we're gonna do with this thing. It's been like 2 hours since that last clip. I've literally just been sitting here playing around with this thing, figuring out a few things, and then looking up some parts online, seeing when I can get them in time. So far, I ended up moving the tires from front to back, and I really like how these small rims and tires look on the front. So I think I'm gonna end up ordering the same 6-inch rims for the back and the same tires as well, so they'll fit in the sleeves too. And then this thing will be nice with the same wheels and tires front to back. And then I even was playing around with the suspension a little bit. I ended up pulling out the old stock suspension and throwing in that one coil I had, and this thing actually is perfect. I think it's a 10.2-inch shock and spring, and it leveled out the arms exactly like how I wanted. And then I just been playing around with this thing, getting the ride height all dialed in. So this is basically how the ride height's gonna sit at the moment. So I'm gonna order up another set of springs, because I tried just seeing if I can order one more of these, and it's like a week and a half wait. So I'm not gonna wait for that. I'm just gonna end up spending the extra 20 bucks and buy a pair of springs that I can get in time of this video, hopefully. And then I even measured up for my rear spring, so I'm gonna end up doing a 7-inch rear shock and spring for the back, and it'll fill in that gap there. And once I actually get the small wheels and tires on there, it'll level out nicely. You can kind of tell a little bit it's raked, so you can see how much smaller the sleeve is compared to that tire. So once this actually drops down, it should drop down the rear perfectly and level this thing out nicely. So I'm gonna order up the shocks right now, so then I can actually have them in time for this video, because it's like 7 o'clock on Tuesday. And this video goes out on Friday, so I gotta order that up right now. I was planning on trying to get the rims and tires in for this video, so then we have at least like a complete roller with nice rims and tires and suspension. But the tires won't be here for, I think, a week and a half, and I'm not gonna wait. Actually, I'm gonna order them, but I'm gonna have to wait for those, so those will probably be in next week's video once we actually get the new rims and tires on the back. But other than that, I think I'm just gonna order up the suspension real quick, and then probably catch you guys in like a day or two whenever I actually get the suspension, and then we can see this thing a complete roller, pretty much at its ride height, without the new rims and tires on the back. So catch you guys in a few days, and once I have some parts. What's up, guys? So it's actually 2 days later. I ordered up some parts and got a few things in so we could finally get them installed onto the ATV frame here. So I ended up picking up all the new suspension I need. So I got some 10 to 11-inch front shocks for both sides on the front there, and then I ended up picking up a 7-inch shock for the rear. The only thing is this thing is a lot smaller than pictures looked like, so I might look into seeing if I can find a bigger version of the same size shock, or if anything, I might end up just chopping a couple coils out of the spare shock I have here and then lower it down a little bit to get the desired ride height I want. So now that I got all the new suspension in, we can finally start installing it onto the ATV frame here and see what this ride height's gonna look like. So let's do some YouTube magic real quick and see what this thing's gonna look like. And just like that, suspension's all up and bolted up on this thing, sorta. So the front suspension went in pretty smooth. It's basically the same as I had before, just different color and a little bit different sizing, but it fit all perfectly and bolted in correctly, so that's all solid. The rear was definitely a little bit tricky, so I ended up having to pop out some of the little spacers off the sides and the inner sleeve to get it to fit the 10mm bolt. I think the inner sleeves were, I think, a 8mm if I remember correctly. They're somewhere around here, but I ended up just popping those out, so I ended up having to make some little spacers for each side of the shock here just to make sure it's center and stays center. But I might end up actually chopping a couple coils out of that shock right here just to lower it down a little bit, just because this one's a lot more beefier compared to that. So as you can tell, that thing's a lot bigger, so I definitely want something more like this in the rear so it at least matches all the way around a little bit better. But this thing is looking sweet, and I'm super stoked on this thing. And I totally forgot to tell you guys, I actually got the rims in already too. So ordered up some 6-inch rims for the rear of this thing. So I ended up ordering up some tires as well, literally the same exact tires that are on the front there, but those won't be here until I think Tuesday next week. So you'll see that in next Friday's video coming up on this thing, when we're actually working on this thing a little bit more. I think I'm gonna end up actually mounting up the motor and welding that engine plate, getting all that set up in next video, and then we'll actually have like pretty decent roller and frame all built up. Then we can start getting all the little nitty-gritty stuff done. But got the rims in already, so I can at least test fit these, make sure those are all gonna fit up correctly, and then once the tires get in, we can get those mounted up and get the sleeves put on them, so that'd be sweet. But other than that, I think I'm pretty much just waiting on parts right now. I could start mounting up a motor and getting the engine plate all in there. I got the engine plate right there. That's an old one off the go-kart from way back, but why not use it? I already have it. And then I have a motor up there from my black mini bike that's in the corner, or I have a motor over there that I can use. So either one I can fit. I just got to figure out if I want to do an aftermarket gas tank or if I want to keep the stock style gas tanks that come in the 6.5 horsepower motors, but we'll see. And then I'm still figuring out if I want to keep the stock style ATV seat or if I want to build a custom seat. But there's a few little things I want to figure out on this thing before I actually go too crazy. I'm working on it, so I'm still figuring all that out. But other than that, I think it's going to be the end of today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, hope you like, comment, subscribe. Stay tuned for more content, and peace out.